Hello, my name is Gareth Rendle. I'm happy to be able to introduce this work on behalf of my colleagues investigating the influence of audiovisual realism on communication behaviour in group-to-group telepresence. Telepresence systems bring geographically separated users together in a shared virtual space, where remote users are represented by expressive life-size avatars. Group-to-group telepresence systems support communication between multiple remote parties. In group-to-group systems, such as those based on the multi-user stereoscopic projection screens shown here, users communicate simultaneously with collocated and remote conversation partners, meaning that the virtual representations of remote users can be directly compared against a real reference. The three research questions addressed in this work relate to this characteristic of group-to-group telepresence. Our first research question addresses the impact of the realism of remote users' avatars. Previous works in one-to-one telepresence scenarios have compared reconstructed avatars, which are generated in real time from image streams, with tracked CG avatars, which are pre-generated and animated during runtime by the tracked movements of the user. They found that reconstructed avatars led to more social presence, more trustworthy interactions, and higher positive affinity. In this work, we ascertain if this holds when avatars can be compared with real users, as well as investigating how avatar realism affects communication quality in a group-to-group scenario. Our second research question investigates the impact of spatial audio, which has shown benefits in video conferencing systems and immersive listening scenarios, but not yet in immersive communication scenarios. Here, we investigate whether a listening scenario with multiple virtual and real sound sources results in a measurable impact of spatial audio on communication. Our third research question asks how communication between remote users differs from communication between collocated users. The group-to-group context supports this comparison since users interact with collocated and remote users simultaneously. To answer our research questions, we designed a group-to-group telepresence study. 16 groups of 4 participants completed the study, with groups split between 2 locations. A multi-user projection screen in each location allows the groups to communicate in a shared virtual space. The study had a within-subject design with 2 independent variables being manipulated. First, the avatar realism was varied between 2 levels. Remote users were represented as real-time reconstructed volumetric avatars in one mode, and abstract avatars with simple geometry animated by tracked movements in the other. Second, the aural spatial realism was varied, with the remote users' voices being spatialized in one mode and presented as a diotic signal, that is, the same in both ears, for the other mode. These variables resulted in 4 different study conditions, which were counterbalanced. Participants performed a conversation task called the survival task under each condition. They were given a description of a survival scenario and each received a different list of 3 items. The group's task was to discuss and agree on 6 of the 12 items that would be most likely to help them survive in the given scenario. We chose this task because it fosters a more natural discussion than some more structured tasks, and every participant has something to contribute. The multi-user projection screens used by participants to communicate between locations are based on those introduced by Froehlich et al. For spatial audio, room impulse responses were recorded in the corresponding rooms and applied using an adapted version of the PyBinSim binaural renderer. The head and hand movement of each participant was tracked with infrared tracking targets, and participants wore a microphone and a set of transparent headphones that allowed them to hear collocated and remote users simultaneously. Participants completed a 26-item questionnaire after each trial. For better reliability, we analysed responses in a combinatorial manner by forming item groups corresponding to various aspects of communication. 2 item groups assessed whether participants felt they understood and were understood by collocated and remote teammates respectively. 1 item group assessed perceptions of the remote user's visual avatar quality, and another item group related to the overall group cohesion. To obtain behavioural measures relating to communication, we analysed head orientation data as a proxy for eye gaze direction. This allowed calculation of the gaze likelihood, or the proportion of time a participant was looking at their co-located teammate, the remote teammate opposite them, or the remote teammate that was adjacent to them. We also classified and quantified glances, defined as unbroken periods of visual attention paid to the same target. Let's have a look at the results now. First off, we investigate how avatar realism impacted questionnaire responses. Despite visual artifacts in the reconstruction of the volumetric avatars, caused mostly by the necessary shutter glasses, we found a significant positive effect of the more realistic volumetric avatar condition on the perceived message understanding with remote users, the rating of visual quality of remote users' avatars, and the perceived cohesion of communication within the group. Analysis of the gaze data shows that participants spent significantly more time looking at remote teammates when they were represented as volumetric avatars. Volumetric avatars were also associated with higher glance frequency and longer mean glance duration at remote adjacent teammates. So our results show that representing remote users with a visually realistic volumetric avatar, rather than a less realistic tracked avatar, has a positive impact on subjective measures of communication. The increase in visual attention found through gaze analysis also suggests that users are more engaged when interacting with realistic avatars. We therefore conclude that even though avatar appearance can be directly compared to real stimuli, visual realism is still beneficial in group-to-group telepresence. Addressing the second research question regarding the impact of spatial audio, we found no significant effect of audio condition on the responses to the questionnaire and only minor differences through gaze analysis. This was surprising since we expected spatial audio to help identify the speaker when facial expressions were not shown. However, spatial cues may have been redundant in our study if speakers could be differentiated by their voice, since precise sound source localization was not otherwise required. Spatial audio may be more impactful in communication scenarios with moving sources or more temporally co-present speakers. Our third research question investigates how co-located communication differs from remote communication. We can compare ratings of perceived message understanding relating to co-located and remote teammates, finding that participants felt that it was slightly easier to get their message across to co-located participants than remote participants. We can also analyse whether gaze interaction differs between co-located and remote pairs. We found that participants were most likely to be looking at their remote opposite teammate in blue. Since this is because of the default positioning of the participants looking towards the centre of the group, it is more instructive to compare the gaze behaviour relating to the co-located and remote adjacent teammates in green and yellow. We can see that there is a non-significant tendency to look at the remote adjacent teammate more often than the co-located teammate. Looking at the other gaze-related metrics, we see that participants glanced at remote adjacent teammates significantly more than at the co-located teammates. It's unsurprising that participants rated the unmediated communication to be better than that with remote teammates, and encouraging that the difference in perceived message understanding was small. The finding that more glances were paid to remote participants is somewhat contradictory if one takes glances to indicate engagement, but instead the increased visual attention could be a result of increased difficulty in interpreting non-verbal communication cues from the mediated avatar representations. So, to summarise, we conducted a group-to-group telepresence study assessing the effect of avatar realism and spatial audio on communication. While spatial audio had few effects on our measures of communication quality, we found that visual avatar realism improved understanding and group cohesion. We also found that co-located communication was preferred to remote communication, and we found behavioural differences in interaction between remote and co-located teammates. In future work, we aim to investigate HMD-based group-to-group telepresence scenarios. In these contexts, co-located users may only be visible through video see-through displays, blurring the lines between real and virtual stimuli. And spatial audio may play a more important role since participants can move around the scene freely. Thank you very much for watching.